Welcome to the King of the Court podcast with Ben Riggs and Ben Staten.
All right, welcome to the King of the Court podcast. I'm Ben Riggs. This is Ben Staten.
Yo.
Hey, man, it's really good to be back. Right after our last podcast, I got sick. The weather's been changing so much down in the South. Like, there's like days where you need like a sweatshirt and an overcoat. And then like right now, I'm in a hoodie and shorts because I'm confused and don't know what the day is going to throw at me or how to dress. I'm starting to feel a little bit better, but I hate we missed. There was some really good stuff that we missed. We had the in-season tournament, NBA Cup semifinals. That's resulted in OKC and the Bucks playing. We'll get to that in a second. We had a hell of a game out in Golden State the other night where the Golden State Warriors set their franchise record for three-pointers made in a game and lose by 10 because the Dallas Mavericks looked like they were playing 2K on the offensive end of the court. Luka put up a 45-point triple-double. We'll get into that in a bit too. But I know one thing that you and me, it's like I haven't felt well. You've been traveling, right?
Yeah, I had to go to my brother's graduation. Shout outs to Gabe for finally getting his PhD. And I
Congratulations.
wanted to read the name of his thesis because apparently he's majoring in Star Trek engineer. We got stability of space-time finite element discretizations of subdiffuse time fractional differential equations. I'm pretty sure that's the thing that the engineer
I was
has
reading
to solve.
about that while I was reading about that at breakfast this morning.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the engineer in like a Star Trek Next Generation episode had to solve this, lest the Enterprise is going to get stuck in some other dimension. But congrats to him. It's been a long time. It was really, really cool to go down to South Carolina and see him graduate.
At University of South Carolina?
Yep, go Gamecocks.
All right, that's awesome. They actually got screwed in the college football playoffs this year, I think. But it's funny you mentioned the Star Trek thing. This is in reference to Star Wars, but like 15 minutes ago, I saw. We don't really get into politics much, but this was funny. I saw where all the drone stuff that's going on up in New Jersey.
Yeah,
I saw where I think he's a state senator now, but Doug Mastriano, who had run for governor up there, I think he ran for governor against Josh Shapiro. He shared a picture of a truck carrying a TIE fighter to like a Comic-Con convention. Shared a picture of that, talking about the government's conspiracy to hide all these drones they're recovering and transporting to secure government facilities. I thought that was awesome.
When you need to be more of a nerd, okay? Like if you can't identify a TIE fighter, I got a
You
problem.
at least need a nerd on the staff who's like, Senator,
boss.
this is a TIE fighter from the popular Star Wars series. Anyway, like equally as confusing, perhaps. I mean, it's not confusing. I get it. Like Golden State goes out, they make a trade. They get Dennis Schroeder. I mean, they really didn't give up a lot for it.
3 second-round picks.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like, given how low the asking price was, I'm surprised the Lakers didn't go in a little more for that because, like, he solves a core problem that the Lakers have.
Yeah.
But they didn't. And Schroeder's out in Golden State now, which has really just become like a guard sanctuary. Like, it's just there's so many guards out there. And it's not so much that I have a hard time understanding where Schroeder fits in, right? Like I get like in the non-Steph minutes, you put Schroeder on ball as point guard running your offense. I get that. He's the type of player who's going to be able to maintain sort of the team defensive intensity. He'll actually be an upgrade defensively on Steph whenever Steph's off the court, which is kind of exactly what you need.
Yeah.
But with that said, what I don't get is I felt like I had been led to believe that Brandon Podziemski was like going to eventually be like an all NBA level player, an all-star level player or something by Golden State in the offseason. And quite honestly, man, if you're bringing in Schroeder to handle the ball during the non-Steph minutes, it's hard for me to see where you believe that about Brandon Podziemski. By you, I mean Golden State. Like, how do you, Steve Kerr? How do you believe Brandon Pajemski is a future All NBA or All Star level player when you don't trust him to handle the ball in those non-Steph minutes, and you're bringing in Schroeder, and then you've got Moody too. Like, he wasn't a point guard, but it's going to push the amount of minutes available. So there's a lot of guys there who I just really don't understand what they're doing with them.
Golden State's got to decide what they want to do. Are they going to go all in, and like that would mean specifically trading Kuminga and Pajemski for more win now pieces. They had the opportunity to do that this summer with Markin, or they're going to rebuild. And this move is really perplexing because it it comes across as a win now move, but they refused to trade any of the two young core pieces, Pajemski and Kuminga, to make a secondary improvement. This move alone does not shift the needle enough to win a title. I think everyone agrees with that.
I mean, this move doesn't move the needle enough to change the outcome of that game the other night. I mean, especially not in the West.
No, but what it is going to do is it's going to cut into Pajemski's minutes, which means that you're just going to reduce his future value for trading him. They need to consolidate
or
their
slow
roster.
Development.
They have 12 13 players who can play on their roster right now. When Steve Kerr is your coach, we saw this in the Olympics. We've seen this before. He is going to play the veterans over the young guys. Kuminga had to literally bully him last year to get minutes. Moody, they signed him to a 3-year, $13 million a year deal. He still doesn't get minutes this year. He just does not play young players. He's one of those coaches. There's a lot of them in there. Doc Rivers fits that bill. But if you're going to have a coach like that, then it makes more sense to trade your young players when their value is highest, especially if you are publicly saying that you are hesitant to invest mega money over long-term years on the Kuminga side. They're not willing to give him the $150 million plus 5-year extension that he's going to want. It makes sense to trade them when their value is highest. Right now, they have both Pajemski and Kuminga coming off the bench. Kuminga kind of shifts in and out depending. Like sometimes Draymond's on the bench, but Draymond is clearly, in terms of the power, the power ranking on that team, he's higher than Kuminga. They are not getting showcased enough to maximize their value. By continuing with this strategy, you are reducing their value and thus the value of the player you can get in return. They need to decide now if they want to do a strategy basically where they're going to do what the Lakers are kind of doing right now, which is we'll continue with our older player core pieces in LeBron and AD, but we're basically in a rebuilding mode and we're just sort of waiting out AD and LeBron at this point because we're not going to trade any of our picks. We're not going to make any all-in moves. Where to decide they're going to do that? Or then they need to trade away their younger players. It makes no sense because Pajemski's not going to develop into an all-star player in this environment. I don't think he can in any environment, but definitely not here. And Kuminga, he's went from a player who this offseason was seen across the league as a future all-star to one this year has gone back to being like, what is he? We've reduced his value. So, yeah, I think there's been talk about this potential LeBron move. We covered it in a past pod. I think that would be an absolutely...
Yeah, the only way the Schroeder thing makes any sense to me is if you're looking to repackage him as an asset in a trade. It's not that it doesn't make sense to me. It's just that it didn't solve your problem. It's an upgrade, a minor upgrade at a position that devalues a young trade asset or stunts his progression. There are things about it I understand, things about it I don't understand, but it certainly doesn't improve your ability to compete for a championship this year. Speaking of the Lakers, another quick just observation was LeBron took 8-10 days away from the team or whatever it was.
Something like that.
Yeah, he's 40 years old. There was a little break in the schedule to where he could miss 2 games and basically get a week and a half off by doing that. Did it. Came back the other night, looked pretty good. I mean, he seemed to be moving well. I suspect this is going to kind of be the pattern with LeBron throughout the year. I think 82 games for a 40-year-old is an insane. I think he could do it. It's not whether or not I think LeBron could physically show up for 82 games. It's just like in terms of what you're able to offer the team, you're going to get diminishing returns for every minute played at 40.
100%. Yeah.
And
Do you
so,
want a
like,
fresh LeBron or do you want a LeBron who's tired and
100%.
exhausted by it?
The internet went wild with potential reasons for why a 40-year-old would disappear for 10 days. I saw just like crazy shit being suggested as to why he's gone, but he came back. He looked pretty good. It's actually kind of interesting to me. Like, this Memphis team is, you and I have talked about this before. It's not so much this year. The Kings have really sort of struggled in ways that I didn't anticipate them. But we've talked about in the past how, like, the Lakers could look good and they get in a playoff series against the Kings, and I just wouldn't trust them against the Kings. Kings just have their number.
Yes.
Strangely, Memphis has looked good, and Memphis got in the playoff series against the Lakers. I just wouldn't trust Memphis against the Lakers. The Lakers just seem to have Memphis's number.
Yeah, I think part of it has to do with it's a good matchup for AD. One, I mean, you saw the Jaren Jackson Jr. fouling out 5 minutes before the game ended. Like he just does not have the discipline to guard AD. And this is becoming an issue for the ultimate version of this team. He's supposed to be the number 3 piece in their big three. In his version of defense is one that like you see an 8-year-old play. Like he's really good at shot blocking, but all he does is just wildly go for a block every time. It's why he averages like 4 rebounds a game as a 7-footer. Like it's undisciplined. It can be effective with these like that, but against really good bigs that know how to bait him and that can be patient, he can be exploited. He also because he's such a bad rebounder. If you have a big who's going to play in the post and is good on the offensive boards, Memphis can really struggle unless it forces them to sometimes play that like 1990s style lineup with both. I'm blanking on the name of their of both Edie and Jackson Jr., which they just don't have the spacing for, and it's just like LA is just a bad matchup. But the bigger point with the Grizzlies,
Yeah, I mean, you can say that.
Yeah.
Like, I just think like you can point to like, Ja's athleticism and all that stuff is incredible. But if you scheme, his size makes him a little easier to kind of clamp up with team defense. I think you're right about Jaren Jackson, or theoretically you're right. I just think you're ignoring the broader picture, which is like it came after LeBron mysteriously disappeared for 8 to 10 days, and you're not exploring the possibility that he got in a TIE fighter and went to Dagobah and collected one of the Infinity Stones to magically recover and come back as some sort of super mutant.
I will admit that I did not consider said possibility.
Yeah, I mean, that's just an example of you
Yeah.
not doing your own research.
Yeah, I mean, possibly. Alternatively, it's also an example of Memphis still not being able to run a half-court offense. So I guess you have TIE Fighter and Dagobah,
half a dozen
or
of the other.
bad half-court, bad half-court offense. One we'll never know, I guess, which one is the the truth. But I think like the Memphis is a weird team. One, they've still been sort of bedeviled by injuries, and they've had some, Ja's not shooting the 3 well. Bane is not shooting the 3 well. He's only at 32% for the year. They're very deep in terms of sort of players that honestly they've sort of hit goal with a bunch of players. Jay Huff's been fantastic. Sky Pippen Jr. has been fantastic. Wells has been fantastic. But like their big move recently was Marcus Smart. Boy, has he looked bad. Like, first off, he looks completely unrecognizable from the Marcus Smart that we saw in Boston, just like physically. He looks like it's very odd. But he just looks like he's kind of washed, unfortunately. And they still, because of the injuries and all this, they still don't have the ability on the court to run a cohesive half-court offense, which the Lakers take advantage of because the Lakers slow the game to a halt. And, and like it plays the LeBron strengths, it keeps their players fresh, but and that's a big issue. But the other major one is they need to find a better secondary scoring option. Like they
Don't like Bane?
I do like Bane, but I like Bane as number three. I think his spot up shooting and that plays much better as number three than number two.
So you see Jaren Jackson Jr. like on a championship team as being a fourth scoring option.
Oh yes, 100%. I don't. I his major value is as a stretch big. It's what he wants to do. And he doesn't. Jackson Jr. is incredibly talented. He is a good defensive. I mean, he's one of the defensive player of the year. He's not just good. He can be great. But like he's averaging 5.8 rebounds a game. And he's never played over 30 minutes a game in a season, I believe. Or if it was. He's only played once in his career. That was last year when everyone was hurt. He is averaging 22 a game, but I'm still not sold on him as anything besides a stretch four. And I think the bigger issue with him is that his optimal position in terms of what he is actually as a stretch five. But since he can't rebound, you can't play him at the five, even though he has the size for it, which forces you to play a double big lineup, which causes its own issues. And so
I agree with that part. I think that's a major issue for Memphis is that they're forced to sort of clog up the floor in their offense to have a second big out there to complement Jaren Jackson. Speaking of possible Kryptonians in the NBA. Tonight, the Milwaukee Bucks and Giannis are going to take on OKC in the NBA Cup Finals. It's interesting. I mean, just as a quick observation, like last year, the Lakers make the NBA Cup, and there seems to be a lot of buzz around it. I'm not arguing this is some weird conspiracy. I'm just saying, like, this is sort of one of the problems the NBA, I think, has when, its best teams are kind of in small markets. You get the Lakers to the NBA Cup, and it's easy to sell tickets and get eyes on it. You get OKC and Milwaukee in the NBA Cup. And, I mean, this is, I think, flying under the radar has been it would be an understatement. Not a lot of attention, not a lot of excitement. Although I think it could be an interesting matchup. And the reason I think it could be an interesting matchup is I'm not at all sure what OKC is going to do with Giannis. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think I know. It's become pretty clear from you listen to just the reports from reporters covering the team, from the talk from the coaches. They're going to try. They're going to try Lou Dort as a primary defender.
They're going to try what?
They're going to try Lou Dort as his primary defender. That
Lou
seems
Dort?
Lou Dort on Giannis. You have thoughts about that? Seems like you do.
The guard?
Yes, the 6'4" guard. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, Giannis is a big guy. Like, I'm not sure Lou Dort could stand on Lou Dort's shoulders and be as big as Giannis. But I mean, I guess like you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. With whoever you match up on Giannis, there are a few people who can do it.
They don't have a physical matchup for him. That's I think the real reason.
They don't have anybody that, like, the only person they have that's big enough can't move with him, and the people who can move with him aren't big enough for him. I mean, me and you both know though that like OKC's defensive approach to Giannis is not going to be based on any single individual's ability to guard him.
Yes,
It's going to be based on team defense and this sort of swarming mentality. Swarming, like one of the things they did well with Luka, and I'll talk. We'll talk about this a little bit later. Like, when Luka's off ball, like they did a very good job of denying him the ball.
yes.
That's going to be a lot harder to do with Giannis.
Well, there's just one. There's a couple. Look, every time we talk about OKC this year, they come out and then like punk the team that they're playing against. So they, like props to them. They played very well recently. But it's one thing to deny someone who's 6'7" ish, 6'7", 6'8". It's another thing to deny a 7 foot of the ball when you're 6'4". Like Dort can get in front, can do all he wants on Giannis. If they're just going to throw the ball over him on defense. If he's playing like he's like fronting or trying to run after him, and you're also not going to have the questions we had in that game, which they came out with too much intensity for Dallas. They're all they you make
Well,
all
you
the
may have that question about. So that's what I was about to say.
Yeah.
You may have that question. Like Luka in that game looked like if you could read. You remember that Mel Gibson movie, What Women Want or What a Man Wants? I don't know what the hell the name of it was, but like women could like read it, like he could read women's thoughts or whatever. He could just hear them, like he was telepathic or something. I never saw the movie. I've seen trailers, but like
This is great. Keep on going. Let's go.
he could just like see a woman walking out of Starbucks and hear her thoughts. And like I felt like if I had that ability with Luka, like that game, what I would have heard him saying was like, I'm not doing this shit in November or December or whatever month it is. Like I'm just not doing this early. Like this like you may get that same response from every other player in Milwaukee. You will not get it from Giannis.
Oh, 100% not.
You get physical with Giannis, and Giannis will get physical back. And hear me very clearly. Not only is there not another player on OKC who can deal with Giannis trying to be physical with you, the state of Oklahoma does not have someone that they can send that can deal with that.
Yeah, and so that's the big issue. Like I think the Giannis is a really bad matchup. On the other hand, though, they do have the guards to frustrate Dame. And
I think OKC can handle this game. Like I had to pick I would pick OKC to win the game. I'm specifically speaking of the matchup with Giannis.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think that like where this gets dicey for them is a situation where like Dort gets in early foul trouble, and then Giannis is going up against Kendrick Williams, 228 pounds of him, and he's suddenly putting up 35 points in the first half on 16 of 20 shooting. Like that's a situation where like you could have it could look rough. The bigger issue, and this is the thing that OKC has thrived upon this year, their primary bench lineups involve some association of Caruso playing with either Cason Wallace, Dort, and either Shai or Jalen Williams, and those lineups produce phenomenal amounts of steals and easy points and like have defensive ratings in the low 90s. They're mauling. They're just mauling bench units for their teams. And Milwaukee famously does not have that great of a bench. It's been a little bit better, but they don't really have a natural backup ball handler besides Dame on their team, which could become an issue. Who's going to bring the ball up, or is that going to be Middleton, who's kind of played that role since coming off the bench and is like not really scoring a lot of points but producing a lot of assists. We'll see how that works. I think that Milwaukee is to have a shot. They need to basically play the bench minutes even, and then hope that once the starters come back in, Giannis can basically open up, basically win those minutes from them. That's got to be their goal, and I just find that hard to believe that's the case. This is OKC is one of the more complete teams in the league, and they also have other advantages. Milwaukee's perimeter defense has gotten better recently, but they've gotten better primarily because they've added a defensive. AJ Green and Andre Jackson Jr. have come in and produced good defensive perimeter defense. The problem against OKC is you have two good perimeter guard scorers, and Dame has to guard one of them, and that's been the issue all year. And like especially you could see like, and if Dame's not able to control penetration into the paint at all against either Jalen Williams or Shai, it's just going to be a really long night for them. So I would pretty heavily favor OKC in this game, but I think that there is a pathway for Milwaukee, albeit narrow, where this becomes Giannis taking over. Lopez has a good game. He goes 5 for 7 from 3. Portis has a decent game. Dame just gets hot for a little bit. Like there is a way for them to secure a win, but I would be if I were a betting man, I'd put money on OKC. To be clear, I'm not a
Oh,
betting man though.
100%, I would put it on OKC. I mean, I think that like Brook Lopez being out there enables them to space the floor for Giannis. And I think like Giannis with the size, strength, quite frankly, speed advantage that he's
Yeah,
going to have against that much smaller. I mean, I think that the interesting thing about this matchup is you're talking about an elite defensive team that is undersized
yeah,
against perhaps one of the top two or three most dominant players in NBA history, physically dominant players in
yes,
NBA. And it's not a Shaq style physical dominance where you're stationary, which that swarming mentality can kind of capitalize or take advantage of. He is an extremely mobile type of physical dominance, which makes it very difficult for the swarming stuff to work and can actually lead to Giannis on the free throw line a lot.
yeah,
And so, like him attacking those gaps. Now, I will say this: OKC is very good at closing those gaps.
yes.
They move very quickly. But Giannis is also very good at
Holding the ball high.
stepping
Yeah,
through those gaps and keeping the ball high and drawing those slap fouls on his arms and stuff like that and finishing it at the rim.
and
So,
leaning into his defender. He's one of the things he's really good at. Like, and it's not like the way Shea does it, where Shea will just like literally clear out his defender with his off arm, or in some cases even leg. Like Giannis just like gets. He's very good because he's so strong that if he just leans his like shoulder into the defender, he can create the space he needs, and he has his body control is one of the greatest we've ever seen in the league. Just
yeah, 100%. I agree 100%. Like, and I think that um, that sort of and look, Giannis has also gotten to where like you can't give him that sort of that defense. You can't back off of him on defense to try to take the drive away and let him shoot the mid range because he's
no.
shooting that mid range shot about as well as anybody in the NBA right now. So I think that it'll be an interesting matchup. I agree with you. Um, I'll say this: if they're going to commit Lou Dort to Giannis, um, the problem I have with that, and I'm taking OKC in this game, but one of the reasons I think you could see an upset or it could be a lot closer than you would expect is if you're committing Dort to Giannis, the amount of help that Dort is going to need, I think, will be significant. Um, and none of the other defenders are the type of defenders that just one on one. I don't think Dame. Like I think Dame can deal with them. Like they'll give adequate ball pressure, but I think one on one Dame can deal with most of those other guys. Especially when most of those other guys are going to be preoccupied with Giannis and what he's doing with Dort. So I think you could end up seeing the opportunity for Dame to have a really big game, especially if he's knocking down perimeter shots.
Yeah, the question with Dort is like the only way that matchup even is like remotely feasible is if Dort is actually physically strong enough to match Giannis. Like,
I can answer that question right now. He is not.
yeah, and and if he is, then we're talking about one of the most unique players, honestly, in NBA. Like the only player his size that we've seen in the last 40 years who can done that is Charles Barkley, like 6'4", who suddenly and just goes into the post and like starts throwing around because like Giannis is
Oh,
strong.
Zion, like that.
Zion, yeah, and Zion, like and so you know, I could be proved wrong on this. I haven't seen that from Dort. Like like he's really 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 strong, but like I haven't seen evidence he's strong. He's strong enough to muscle around with Giannis. But and if not, then you're right. It's going to have to be like crazy help defense, and like they're going to eventually have to switch to a taller, to a small forward
That person
to guard
doesn't.
him.
That person
It
doesn't.
doesn't. No, like it's but like
I mean,
Dort-
like, look,
Dort's so
as
small that
crazy as putting Dort on him sounds, when you actually think through their options, it actually makes a lot of sense that they would have to go with Dort because, like, at that point, like, who do you put on Brook Lopez?
Yeah.
If you,
No.
I mean, the only other person you could think about putting on Giannis would be Hartenstein.
Yeah, and he's gonna tear Hartenstein to bits. He's just too fast for him. He's too fast and too strong.
And then whoever you put on Brook Lopez is going to get torn to bits.
Yeah. And so I mean, what we will see. I think that, um, this that's the key. If Giannis is just able, like, if Giannis just becomes unstoppable, then that just becomes a big issue because we talk about OKC as his all-time great defense, which is their very good defense. Saying a team's all-time great defense 25 games into a season is a little premature. But and also defense is so matchup dependent. Like you can have a defense that's great, like universally good, and then they enter the playoffs and they play a team that matches up well against them and they're hemorrhaging points. It's because it's way more matchup dependent than offense is.
Another problem with the 25 games in calling them the greatest defense in NBA history is, to me, there's a novelty, almost like AAU quality to the style of defense that they play.
Yep.
And good teams are going to crack that. Like, it's ball movement. It's like ball movement. Like that ball move. I don't care how fast.
Yep.
Or disciplined OKC's defense is playing the style of defense that they're playing, swinging that ball quickly. Like take Giannis for example. He drives right, gets down to the low block, stops, is swarmed. He passes it out to Dame. The open shot's not there. Dame immediately swings it to Chris Middleton. One more pass, AJ Green in the corner. They're not going to be able to move fast enough to deal with that. I mean, you think about players like Jokic or Luka, like, no slight to Giannis, but he's not the playmaker those two guys are. Those two guys aren't passing it out to get 2 additional passes. They're skipping those 2 additional passes and making the cross-court pass 40 miles an hour to the open shooter. Teams are going to crack that. Is my
no, it's 80s basketball rules. What I mean by that is you just got to do a right triangle. Like first off, the first key with that swarming defense is you make them swarm you farther out. So you try to make them swarm at the 3-point line. Then you put the release valve player somewhere like far enough away, but on a clear line drive pass. Who now his defender has been peeled off. You get the ball to him, and he can either pass it to an open 3-point shooter, or basically a big man in the post who has a matchup advantage. That's usually what happens, and that person serves as the entry passer. It's not difficult. Like you just make a right triangle. You force him to swarm Giannis, and in the corner, like basically in a corner 3 zone. He passes it to Middleton, who's basically at the top of the key 3-point, and then Middleton gets the ball really quick down in the post before the defense is able to fully react, and Lopez has got an easy jump hook. Or Lopez has got an easy open 3-pointer. That's how you do it. It's a disciplined version of offense that you saw a lot more when post play was more prevalent because post players get swarmed. But like that, a good post player
early in the season and teams aren't prepped for this. And I'm also not entirely clear how much teams are like I don't know that they want OKC making adjustments to what their adjustments are going to be this early in the season. I think that's something that teams that have, like, I think Michael Malone, Jason Kidd, coaches like that aren't really thinking right now, we need to solve this problem. We need to solve this problem in June.
Yeah, to some extent. I also the big advantage OKC has with their defense is that there is no drop off with their swarming defense when they put in their bench personnel. In fact, it actually gets better because Caruso is probably the best sort of like help side swarm defensive player. I mean, like his lineups off the bench and like generate like 6 steals a game. They average 12.9. Like they're generating an astounding number of steals, and that's generating easy points. It's getting them 3 more field goal attempts per game over opponents. It's demoralizing. That sort of that stuff is there's some novelty to it. It's also just like there's just not a lot of teams who can who can fill the bench unit of Case and Wallace, Alex Caruso and Lou Dort if they out there if they want to, so like I
And in
want to make
terms of steals, Shea's great.
Jay's great. Jalen Williams is great. They have been drilled really well by that coaching staff to swipe at the ball without fouling. That is their like to get as many steals as they want and be as like swipe happy as that defense is and commit as few fouls as they are is a testament to how good Dagno has trained that team. But again, there are ways around it. Like this is something that you like. This is a basket. We're talking basketball drill setting. This is like that's why I have questions about the effectiveness in the playoffs, because this is youth. Like you said, it's kind of more. There's some youth basketball elements of this. Like, how do you break a press when you don't have anyone who can dribble? You just sort of like position the guys around the court a little bit, and the ball just hops, hops. So I don't want to seem like we're taking anything away from that, but I just have like the one thing that Giannis is going to have is, especially if he, I don't see them getting as many steals on him as they have in some other past matchups. One, he is actually really, really good. Well, one he doesn't dribble, like he covers incredible amounts of distance. He only takes one or two dribbles. Like he can like there's plenty of videos that will show this. He only needs two dribbles from the half court line to get fully to the hoop. Like so that's a big advantage. Two, like he's incredibly his first step explosion is so fast that that's going to negate. Like he can slip through between players really well, and he is tall. Like Luka is tall, but this is a legit NBA center size player.
Yeah.
And a 6'4" guy swarming him is going to have some impact, but he's going to be able to see above that in a way Luka's not.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of Luka's problems weren't with him on ball.
No,
it was denying him ball.
No, it was the fact that both teams had tailored their strategies, defensive and offensive, to keep Luka off the ball. That was the issue. Both teams got what they wanted. It just worked out better for one of them. But
I mean, it seems like a pretty good transition.
It does. But yeah, so as you've been recovering from your illness this weekend and living in the cave underneath your house, you've been updating me periodically about the mountains of research. He's actually been going for his own basketball PhD. And you were telling me that you had been combing over. I think you said you went over every play since Jason Kidd was in high school that he's been in coach, to decipher what his coaching philosophy was. And you were saying that there's been a lot of talk about Jason Kidd, the mad scientist, and I've been very open on this podcast that I think that his constant tinkering and trying stuff has actually really impeded the Mavs' ability to get into rhythm and find their identity with their new pieces. But you were saying that you saw something else, something different than that from all the plays and the numbers you crunched.
I think that's actually an interesting kind of entry point to this conversation, which was maybe more or less designed to be a discussion about Luka Doncic's usage rate, what's his, what's sort of the sweet spot for him. And I think it does kind of become more a conversation about Jason Kidd and what Jason Kidd's trying to do. And I think that you and I have had sort of positions where you have been more critical of Jason Kidd than I have, with this sort of the mad scientist, going kind of too far and trying to reinvent the wheel. And it's not that I've disagreed. It's been that I've been more of the mindset that, like, I think Jason Kidd has a brilliant basketball mind. I think in relationship to Luka Doncic, having played that position at an all-time great level himself,
title winning.
Yeah, I think he understands it in a way.
I would say he knows how to be a point guard.
I mean, I'm thinking like in terms of coaches, like I think he probably understands it from a player's point of view. as well as anybody in recent history, other than maybe like sort of on the same level like a Steve Nash. But like, you know, I've had the position that like he is clearly experimenting, but that as a player in his own right with that experience and that level of performance, and a coach who's had some success in Dallas coaching Luka, he deserves the right to experiment and try to find sort of what the sweet spot is. But I've been open about how I think that the Dallas Mavericks have not been at their best because I feel like Luka is being forced to play a different style of basketball.
Yep.
And that I've been sort of, when I'd see Luka have a good game, I'd go and look at his usage rate and sort of like, but anecdotally, right? Like
Yeah.
it would be sort of like the other night against Golden State. He'd have this great game, and then I'd go and look at his usage rate, and I'd be like, aha, it's up a few ticks there. It's like it was like up 5 or 6 points, 7 points, whatever it was from the OKC game previously, which was that and that juxtaposition was particularly interesting because the Golden State game was Luka's best game of the year. It's not the best game of his career, but it would certainly be one of the games you would mention as sort of one of his better games of his career. I mean, a 45-point triple-double on 70% shooting against a good team defense is an incredible stat line. But it's juxtapositioned with the Oklahoma City game, which was his lowest usage rate of the year, and by far the worst game of the year, and certainly would be mentioned as one of his worst games of his career, right?
Yes.
And so, like, anecdotally, you see those two things. Usage rate up, greatest game of the season. Usage rate down, worst game of the season. And you think, damn it, Jason Kidd, it's all your fault. If you weren't installing this offense that pushes Luka off ball, reduces his touches, and lowers his usage rate, like he would be playing, at an MVP level consistently. But it's not really that clear. Like you go in and you look at the data, and effectively what you see when you sort of look at the breakdown is that when I say that there is zero difference in his usage rate and the outcome of the game, I mean, there's zero difference. When you look at the average usage rate for Luka Doncic this season, when they win, his average usage rate is 32.8. You know what the damn average usage rate for Luka Doncic is whenever they lose? 32.8. It is the exact same number. When you look at his scoring is down a tick. Whenever and the reason I think this is important, and you actually mentioned this in a previous podcast, is figuring out like it's kind of like our discussions with OKC. When you're talking about teams at this level, and I don't think there's anyone anywhere who thinks that Dallas isn't one of the top two teams in the West. I think OKC and Dallas have established themselves as the two best teams in the West. And people will debate as to which one they think is the best. I think most people would have OKC at number one. And in fact, the rankings have OKC at number one. But when you debate these teams, you're not debating like as to whether they're good teams or not. Like we know OKC is a good team, right?
Yeah.
Like if it seems like sometimes we're hating on OKC, it's not that we're hating on OKC. We know that they're a great basketball team. They're a really good basketball team. Like it's like the conversation we just got through having about their defense was more about like whether or not we believe that sort of novelty AAU swarming like full court press style defense is going to work when teams are watching a ton of film in preparation for it and scheming to deal with it, because they have professional basketball players on their team that are going to move the ball, and we think that they're going to be able to break that, particularly when you're dealing with elite playmakers like Luka and Jokic. Similarly, when we're discussing Dallas, we're not discussing whether or not we think they're a good team. We know they're a good team. We're talking about whether or not they can win a championship. That's the level they're at now. That's the expectation in Dallas. It's about winning a championship. And you said in a previous podcast, there is no possibility of that without Luka Doncic being at his best. So what this conversation really comes down to is, what is Luka Doncic's best? And what is Luka Doncic's best balanced with what gets the best out of his team? And quite frankly, like, one of the things I think you see with the numbers that make it hard, like I said a minute ago, in games where they won, Luka Doncic's scoring is actually down 2 points per game. He's averaging 28 points per game in wins, 30 points per game in losses. He's more efficient in wins. He's shooting the ball about 46% versus 45% in losses. The sweet spot for his usage rate seems to be in the 29 to 33 range. And that's still like a relatively high usage rate compared to, I mean, it's going to be way higher, probably higher than 98% of all NBA players. But to put it into context, like LeBron has never hit 34. Like some of those Cleveland teams have LeBron hovering in the 33, 32 range. He peaked at 33.5, right? So, like, I think what we're looking at is, where do you find optimal usage for Luka? And it's really difficult based on the data up until this point of the season to tell. And why I say that is, when you look at his first 10 games or so, like, he's coming out of the offseason where he didn't have a training camp and didn't play preseason. And so those first few games, like, it's real easy to look at what they're trying to do with having him off ball and shit on it and say, like, well, this doesn't work. Look how inefficient he is. And the truth is since he's come back from his injury, like, his usage rate hasn't really changed that much. Like, it kind of fluctuates from game to game. Like, he's had some higher usage rate games in there because Kyrie wasn't playing and he was taking on more of an offensive workload in those games. But by and large, he's kind of hovered around the same place. You've just seen it tick up, his efficiency tick up more, right? Since he's come back from the wrist injury. He gets about 10 days off from the wrist injury, and his efficiency ticks up. And I think that probably has a lot more to do with him settling into the season and less to do with the style of play, if that makes sense. And so, but because of that, it kind of taints the data, right? Like, so, like, you look back at some of those early games and you say, well, he's not really efficient. I think that's because he's adapting to a new style of play, which I myself have said, when in reality, the simpler explanation was it had nothing to do with him adapting to a new style of play. It had to do with him adapting to being back into the NBA regular season without a training camp or a preseason. But ultimately, what I think really does matter for the Dallas Mavericks, and this is where I go back to Jason Kidd and what he's trying to do. When you look at the variation and outcomes for the Dallas Mavericks, it has so much less to do with Luka's usage rate. It has far more to do with injuries, which is the most common sense, obvious explanation for anything. And really is not a sexy finding at all. But when you look at their 5-man starting lineup of Luka, Kyrie, Clay, PJ, and Lively, so they're 10-2 overall for the season. When all five of those guys play, they're 10-2. One caveat for that 5-man lineup is that, if you remember early in the season, even though Kidd said to begin the year Lively was going to be the starter, Lively did not start. In those 2 losses, Lively played, but he was not the starter. When those 5 guys start, they're undefeated.
Repeat that for the audience, because I think that's an important stat right there.
When those 5 guys start, when it's Luka, PJ, Clay, Lively, and Kyrie, those 5 guys are undefeated as a starting rotation. All right?
Yeah.
Crazy enough, like, they're not just undefeated. Those 5 guys play. Now these numbers include the games where Lively didn't start but played. They have a defensive rating of 106, an offensive rating of 128, and a net rating of 22.5. They're not just undefeated. They're dominant.
They're good.
Yeah. And when it's funny because, like, you look at the Mavericks without Luka, And I mean, I don't believe this, but this is one of those things where, the data shows. It's not that I don't believe it. It's that I think that you can extrapolate things from what I'm about to say that I think are exaggerated. But like when you look at when the Mavericks record without Luka, and some of this has to do with scheduling. But the Mavericks were 5-1 without Luka. They were 1-1 without Kyrie. Which suggests that they weren't going against great teams in those games. I think the most quality win was against the Knicks. In one of the games, Luka wasn't there. But so scheduling certainly has a piece of that, but it suggests that there's enough offensive firepower on that team that in short absences with those two, they can certainly get by.
Yeah, I think that's a key point to put in here is that this is the first time in Luka's entire career that he has had a legitimately elite starting supporting cast.
Oh, and so real quick to put a button on that.
Yeah.
When you go and you look at the LeBron years where his usage rate creeps up to around 34, it's when he's carrying those teams deep into the playoffs, into the finals, where it's like it could be a Jeopardy question, like name the other four people who are on that team. Like
Junis Ilgauskas, Varejao, Boobie Gibson, and I don't remember the last one, but yeah.
Like you're seeing it out
Larry
of
Hughes. There you go, Larry Hughes. Yeah. All right, you see, yeah.
You're seeing it out of necessity with those guys. Those guys, like their usage rate is creeping up.
So you don't think Boobie Gibson was a good 3-and-D defender player? Is that what you're just trying to tell? Yeah.
Well, I mean, those guys are quality NBA basketball players, but there's no one on that team that's a legit scoring threat, right?
Oh, 100%.
And I think like you've seen that with Luka during the Donnie Nelson years in Dallas. It's funny. I read an article, I think it was in Mavs Moneyball, where he was talking about the Donnie Nelson years. And there's a quote from Don Nelson that says, like, Luka's going to have to learn that it's part of his maturation process. He's going to have to learn that he doesn't have to do every single thing. He doesn't have to carry the entire offensive load for his team. And, that's kind of ironic coming from a guy who's basically signing players based on the idea that Luka can carry every single element of the offensive load for the team by signing cheaper sort of high quality role players rather than pairing him with legitimate scoring threats. And I agree with you. This year's team is the first time Luka's had a team where you really do have to, in order to maximize what Dallas has to offer, you have to think about ways to lower Luka's usage rate, while simultaneously you don't want to go too far. You want to find that sort of sweet spot in there, right?
Yeah.
But real quick, like the thing I said earlier that I think people could extrapolate too much from, it's not that I think like you could look at 5-1 without Luka and then conclude that like Luka's not essential to this team. I think that's a nonsensical statement that doesn't even deserve a rebuttal. 1-1 without Kyrie, I feel the same way. Like you can't say like not having Kyrie is sort of like it doesn't matter. It's that the Dallas Mavericks are 16-4 with PJ Washington and 1-5 without him.
Yeah.
PJ Washington is absolutely instrumental for this team. Now, obviously, that's not about like him carrying this huge offensive workload. In fact, I think when he's on the floor with the starting five, you see his offensive workload actually go down a little bit. And with Luka or Kyrie out, you see it tick up some because he gets more shots. I think effectively what happens is when he's on the floor with the starting unit is it enables him to focus more of his energy on defense and rebounding.
Yeah, I mean, this is the reason why Kleba has been so important for them in the past. Before that, is they don't really have another power forward. I mean, Kleba kind of fits that role. I have a lot. I think what has been people talked about is how important he is a byproduct mostly of like the fact that he is a power forward and rather than his skill talent. He is really important because the alternative for him right now in their lineup is basically Najee Marshall, who's rugged but not big enough really to play,
or Omax Prosper.
or Max Prosper, who's too raw. And so he is a legitimate power forward. He's physical. He's a good defender. He moves his feet well, and he can block some shots. He can play that role really well, and he fits into a team and adapts his game exactly what they need when they need it. Like
That's the point. That's the point I think you have to take away from it with PJ. It's not that PJ being on the floor is a guy who's going to come out there and score 18, 20 points a game with your starting five. He's not going to get the shot volume for that. What he's going to do is Luka, Kyrie are going to stretch you as thin as you can. Yep. Like that offensive backcourt is so dangerous that they're going to stretch you thin. The lob threat that Gafford and Lively pose in the middle is always going to anchor a defense. They're never going to be able to separate themselves from that because that lob will always be there. And then when you start thinking about Klay Thompson spacing the floor, there's no question. But this is where Luka being on the floor matters more than you can imagine. It's in reference to Klay Thompson. And this is where I think touches, maybe less than usage rate, but touches for Luka are very important. So when you look at Klay is averaging 15 points per game on 44 and 40% shooting splits with 2 more shots per game with Luka. Without Luka, he's averaging 6.7 points per game on 19 and 23% shooting splits. Klay is an entirely different guy with Luka out there on the floor. And the reason for it is Klay has to work for shots when Luka's not on the floor.
100%. And yes, I agree with you. He has to work for them. Klay right now, and this has been a constant thing that we've seen since he's had the ACL and then the Achilles injury. His balance is not what it was beforehand. He lists on his 3-point shots, especially if he catches the ball momentum, in movement. He lists a little bit that affects the stability of the shot. It also makes it's just going to make it a tougher shot. However, if he gets his feet set and he's just catching the ball or he's stepping into the 3-pointer, like moving forward, he's one of the greatest 3-point shooters of all time. But at this point in his career, you basically want him taking catch and shoot threes or like corner 3-pointers and having to limit as much as possible the off the ball movement he has to do to get them. And I completely agree with that. I also think that I think that the question about Luka's usage is interesting, but I think it kind of like my issue with it this year has been less the usage, but more how the usage is, what the usage has been.
This is everything.
Yeah,
it's not how much; it's how.
Yeah, and in years past, so like for listeners, so usage counts like how much of a possession a player has been involved in. So like if you are involved as like the assist maker, you're counted in that. If you're involved in the shooter, you're counted in that. So like it counts a bunch of different stats. But it's not just it doesn't just count assists. It doesn't just count shots or free throws. It counts both of those sectors. And what in years past, Luka was not just the primary playmaker, like kind of like soul, like he was the center, like everything revolved around him. He was kind of the sun at the center of the Mavs universe. And I think that it makes sense to want some diversity in that and try to move that from like 100% to like 75, 60. What the Mavs have got, what Kidd has done this year is it's been even more aggressive than that. And so Luka, I think he went too far in the direction of trying to diversify who's the primary ball handler. And the result is that Luka is at this point he's getting his usage, but a lot of that is just him taking shots. And what gets him into rhythm and what is seen, the games where he goes on fire are the games where from the get-go he's involved, he's running the offense, he's running it like a clock. He gets either he gets a couple of easy assists, he gets a step back 3-pointer running like that. Being at the center of the action, at the being the primary playmaker is what gets Luka into his groove. It's what he's comfortable with. It's what he thrives in. It's also, quite frankly, the best way to utilize Luka. And I think that if you're going to have Luka on a team, you need to be comfortable with him being the dominant playmaker, even more so than like we've seen other players in the past. And the point, and what has happened this year is the I think Kidd has pushed Luka away from that to a large extent, and one, it's made Luka, just being blunt, I think he's been frustrated about that. It's been pretty clear. You haven't seen like his stats are down. Like he's down 6 points. It's down in assists. He's down, I believe, or I think he's pretty close in rebounds. His shooting splits are lower. But I think he does. I think he's frustrated with the role. I think that doing this now, what like starting the season off running this experiment was a bad idea, specifically because they brought in a bunch of complementary pieces, and those complementary pieces needed time to gel with Luka. And by not, so what I would have done in that situation was I would have started off the season running the standard Mavs offense that you're going to be running during the playoffs. Get them comfortable, get Clay in rhythm with Luka, figure out how to play with Luka. His adaptation, he's never played with someone like that. Get Najee Marshall into understand where his role is. Get Quentin Grimes to understand his role is. Get Spencer Dinwiddie reacclimated to what it's like to play with the Luka. But instead of doing that, it's been all over the place. They've been sort of ping-ponging about, like, there have been games where Quentin Grimes has been primary ball handler. There's been games where Kyrie's the primary ball handler. There's games where Luka's still the primary ball handler. There's a lot, like, they're trying different things all the time, and no one's been able to figure out specifically where their role is on offense.
But I think that every game Luka's played, he would be the highest usage player. Like he's the primary ball handler. There are times where they're putting the responsibility of initiating the offense into someone else's hands. But like for example, like anecdotally, I believe the same thing that you were saying a minute ago about like the higher Luka's usage rate is going to be, the more in rhythm he's going to be, the more into the game he's going to be, and as a result, the better the product you're going to get, the better the outcome you're going to get. But like if you look at that Golden State game the other night, he had a 33.6% usage rate in that game.
Yeah.
That would be the lowest usage rate of his career since his rookie year. If you were to like basically extrapolate that and apply it to an entire season.
And that's the optimal version of this. But like the usage, what I was seeing from him is he was the primary initiator in that game. He really was. What
they did in that game that I thought was smart, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's done it multiple times. I just haven't noticed, and I'll certainly concede that could have happened. But like effectively having him take handoffs and run through screens, take handoffs, and then get downhill from a position that like basically what you're doing is you're saying, all right, Luka, when you're on ball and you take on a defender off the dribble, you beat the defender and then you get downhill. What we're going to do is we're going to eliminate all of the calories you burned prior to getting downhill by just taking a dribble handoff, some type of, pin down, run off a screen, take a handoff, and we're going to get you to downhill without you having to exert that energy and then put you in the exact same situation to either score or create for others. And I think that works. Like if what you're looking for is to sort of diversify your offense some, give opposing teams different looks, because there's certainly every game you're certainly just having Luka bring the ball up and just take on the point of attack defender, and look to generate offense one way or the other that way. I mean that's always going to be part of Luka's game. But like trying to create some diversification in the offense and give opposing teams different looks that they have to deal with is certainly, and I think in that, like preserving Luka some too.
Yes.
I think that's some of what Jason Kidd's trying to do. And it worked the other night. It worked fabulously. Like, I mean, he was as efficient as he's ever been in that game.
Here's the number I love from the game against the Warriors. Luka assisted on 29 of the 52 made, scored or assisted on 29 of the 52 made field goals for the Mavs.
Yeah.
That number right there shows he's the offense is revolving around him. He is the central, he is the body that everything is orbiting around. That's what I want. That's where the Mavs are at best, and that's when you get the best Luka. One of the things that's been frustrating this year, and I think a lot of the talk about Luka has been, referencing this, but sort of like not directly, is the cocky, brash, snarly, super competitive, like I'm gonna slit your throat and destroy you at all times, Luka that we've seen in past seasons. It's been a lot more muted this year, and I think some of that may be an attempt by him to to be more mature and more level-headed on the court. But some of that I think is also frustration with his role. And Luka has a history of when
he's 25. Like that's 25. The thing people forget about him. He's 25. Yeah. Like he's not some old man. Like and it's not. There's nothing wrong with asking him to be more mature. Yeah. But like just like we're talking about with the usage rate stuff, like there's a balance there. Like I want you to be more mature and not get in fights with the refs, but I want you to be the guy who looks at Rudy Gobert and says, "You can't fucking guard me."
Yeah, I wanted you to keep all that. I just need you not complaining after every shot to the refs and not running back on defense. Like that's the stuff I need to cut out. The rest of it, please keep it. That other stuff's really great.
100%.
And the Mavs ride off that energy. Like that pumps the team up. And I think so. I think a lot of this is sort of like he's just not playing with the same intensity. That's a lot of what the discussion about intensity is. We're not seeing the same sort of like fire that we've seen from historically. I
don't disagree. I mean, I just think that there is an element of with this particular team, and I don't see it as much different than LeBron. Like it's not that. And this is where I disagree with some of the people who always want to make the Luka needs to get off ball argument. Is okay, this year there is a case for like Luka needing to generate more offense for his teammates, right? Because he actually has teammates that are capable of producing, right? In past years, that just hasn't been the case. And even still, Luka's been incredible at creating for other people. Like Luka is arguably the best playmaker in the game right now and has been. The problem has been who he's been paired with. And so now there is an element where to optimize outcomes with Luka, like it's just about it's about playmaking, right? Like, and you've got to put him, whatever it is that you're trying to do, like let him bring the ball up the court, attack the primary defender, let him generate offense in his sort of traditional heliocentric way. It works. Have him come off of pin down screens, take handoffs, get downhill, generate offense for his teammates. It works. I'm fine with both of those things. Like that to me is not an issue. What is an issue, and you saw it in the OKC game, when you have him off ball, like you have to accept, just like on defense, and we've talked about this before ad nauseum. Like, and I'll mention right now, Luka's second in the NBA in steals per game. So, I mean, we can shit on his defense all day long. His defensive rating isn't like first team All NBA, but it's also not shabby either. So like he like some of the defensive stuff gets blown out of proportion. But what you and I have talked about is a lot of what people criticize Luka for on defense is there's the thing you mentioned earlier, like some horrible blow by or not getting back on defense or whatever happens because he was pissed off about some call that a ref made. That's one part of it. The other part is he's an incredible point guard who's able to score and create for others at a level that very few people in NBA history have been able to. And so you end up walking away from that thinking he is a point guard. On the other end of the floor, he is not a point guard. He is a damn power forward. He is 6'7", every bit of 240, 250 pounds. To ask him to go out there and stick with Ja Morant consistently is unrealistic. He's not quick enough for that. All right. But like when you think about him on the offensive end, there's an element of the off-ball stuff that sort of overlaps with that. And that OKC game when you're off ball, one of the reasons Steph Curry is so good at that is he's able to shift and quickly lose his defender.
He's moving. Luka doesn't move well like when he's off ball. That's part of the issue. It's like their weights like part of the responsibility lays on him. Let's be clear. Let's be clear. Like one of the issues the Mavs are running into is they need there is a long history in the NBA of dates back to Wilt Chamberlain of these heliocentric players who basically encompass everything on their teams. Like these guys that will lead their teams in rebounding, points, and assists. Like this goes back to Wilt Chamberlain, having phenomenal regular season games, being clearly the best players in the league or amongst the best players in the league, and then running into the playoffs and getting to either the conference finals or the finals and running and losing to teams that don't have a same level of star, but their talent's more evenly distributed. They have a much better floor. They have, the supporting cast is much stronger, and like the Celtics against beating the Chamberlain teams. This goes back to the early LeBron years. It's just a history, and I understand why. It makes sense. It's a very long season. The postseason's very long. It's a lot easier to focus your energy on shutting down one person than it is five. That's the whole strength in numbers of Boston's offense. And the whole point of getting all these supporting pieces for Luka is to utilize them. If you don't there's not really a point of Klay Thompson if he shoots 5 times a game. There's not really a point of Najee Marshall if he's going to get 4 shots a game. So you want to incorporate them. So to expect Luka to put up the 34 points a game he was last year, that wasn't realistic because a lot of that was due to the fact that, especially at the beginning of the year, the only scoring on the entire roster was coming from Kyrie and Luka. So we needed to put up 34 to just get the tread water. And if you look at Luka's playoff numbers, you would think if you just compared to regular season that Luka choked in the playoffs because he averaged 28.9 points a game. Coincidentally, the same number he's averaging right now this season, but in the playoffs, and that's almost 6 points lower than his regular season average. But there was if you watch the games, Luka was playing at a better level in the playoffs, in my opinion, than he played in the regular season. It was just that he trusted his supporting cast more. The scoring was more diversified throughout the roster. You could trust on P.J. Washington.
Oh, there are games where P.J. Washington and Derek Jones are winning series for them because Luka has put them in a position to knock down shots.
So, absolutely, I believe that the ultimate evolution of Luka is someone who's averaging close to 30 points a game and 10 assists, push those assist numbers up. I 100%. I understand what Kid was doing. I think
to your point, real quick.
Yeah.
First 10 games, Luka was averaging 29, 8, and 8 on 41, 33, and 78% shooting splits. Since returning from his injury, he's averaging 31, 11, and 9 on 52, 43, 73 splits.
Yeah.
That's I think where I'm coming to the Kid's defense is that we're looking at the first 10, 12 games because in regards to Luka.
Yeah, he missed a chunk of the season already.
Yeah, he missed a few games as a result of the wrist injury. So it's there's a bifurcation in his season so far that we're analyzing. And in those first 10 games, he was clearly inefficient. I think you can definitely, in fact, I think I would attribute the bulk of that to him not having a preseason or a training camp. But I'm certainly willing to say, him coming off ball is different. And for anybody who's been a ball handler playing basketball, even if you can adjust to not initiating the action per se, and coming off a pin down and taking the handoff or whatever, running off a screen and receiving the ball, there is a rhythm to generating your offense off the dribble versus catching it and generating your offense on the run. Those are two very different things. And I fully believe Luka's the level of player that can adjust to that, right? But I'm willing to admit that to start the season, him adjusting coupled with not having a preseason or a training camp resulted in those inefficient shooting splits. And now what you're seeing is both him settling into the season and getting more acclimated with what they're doing. The thing with the OKC game that I think you have to take away from that, though, if you're Jason Kidd, like, I think you can look at it from Jason Kidd's point of view and say, like, look, I hear you, Ben Staten. You don't like Luka coming off ball. You think that, like, it prevents him from getting into a rhythm, so on and so forth. You think it muffles some of his strongest attributes. Some of that I agree with, and I think we can put him in a better position to maximize those skill sets. And we're working on that. And I'll be the first one to say, like, you need time to do those things. Like, you're not going to figure everything out right from day one. And right now you're like 16-7 or whatever your record is. Like, you're sitting right at the top of the Western Conference. Like, you're good to go. Like, there's no reason to be panicking. Take some time to figure those things out. But also from Jason Kidd's point of view, it's going to be like Luka's going to need some time to adjust individually as well. Just as the team's going to have time to adjust to this, Luka's going to have time to adjust to this. I think where I look at Dallas and I say, like, they're better than OKC is it's the play of Luka and Klay together that I think has to scare the shit out of teams in the playoffs.
But that goes back to my point. Like, I want Luka to, like, defer to his teammates more and include them more. That is. I think we both agree with that's the key. Like, the key to this unlocking this full potential of this Mavs team is having Luka be initiator and playmaker more than just, like, going at it like, gun ho, like, and trying to score 40 points a game. I think that,
sure.
like, that, and. What Jason Kidd, he agrees to that philosophy too, very clearly. What he extrapolated from that was, let's take Luka off ball. That is very different to what I would have done, which is not take him off ball, but ask him to become more of a playmaker when he's on ball. I think taking him off ball, like, the pieces they brought in, match much better when Luka is the playmaker than anyone else. Specifically like Klay, like Quentin Grimes running the offense and, like, having Klay off ball and Luka off ball does not maximize Klay because no one's going to be afraid of Klay and dribble penetration. Luka is very stationary, so the defenders don't have to worry about him running around the court. Klay is, at this point in his career, is not as good at as I mentioned before when he has to move, like, run like Peja Stojakovic style around, like, try to get an open three. He doesn't have the balance anymore because in his legs. But what I think the ultimate evolution of this Mavs team is with Luka being the central force in a playmaking role. I don't need him taking the ball out of bounds and dribbling up the court. If you want to diversify that, that's fine. But what I do think, and we saw in the OKC game, but we saw in the Warriors game, was the 2-man actions he was running with Klay, like that. Those were deadly. The 2-man actions that that requires Luka being, like, a primary initiator. You run those, you can run those same things with Kyrie, you can run those same things with Lively. That's where, like, if you have Klay in the corner where they have to respect. You got Kyrie as you can put PJ up
If you remember too in the OKC game, at the end of the game, the Mavericks found, like, a little bit of a little run that they made at the end. A lot of it was the Luka Kyrie 2-man game, having them, because the problem becomes it's the same with Klay. You can't let Klay bring the double team to Luka, set the screen, and then, or I'm sorry, not bring the double team, bring his defender up, set the screen for Luka. Like, then you're in a position where you have to ask yourself, do I want Luka to get a full head of steam heading towards the basket with a step on his defender? Or do I want to double team and leave Klay open? Like, that's the pick your poison. Same's true with Kyrie. And actually, quite honestly, as deadly as Klay is from three, Kyrie's pretty deadly too. And in fact, on the season, might even be more deadly than Klay. I don't know. But the fact that Klay, and I don't want to overstate this because Klay has put the ball on the ground and scored, particularly in that 8 to 12 foot range, highly effectively this year. But there's no comparing what happens when he puts the ball on the floor to what happens when Kyrie puts it on the floor.
Yeah, and Luka's
It's deadly. It's deadly.
And Luka's, the fact that he's very stationary when he's off ball means that the two-man action, when he's not the one with the ball initiating the two-man action, is a lot less effective than if he, like, Kyrie with the ball running two-man with Luka is a lot less effective than if you flipped it with Luka with the ball running a two-man action with Kyrie. Just because Kyrie,
the thing that to what you're speaking about that I think like Jason Kidd has to be very mindful of, particularly in a matchup against OKC, is I think that like and like maybe we can like approach this just to make sure we're on the same page, and it'll help sort of consolidate the conversation and give it a clearer takeaways for our audience. Like I think me and you are both saying, like, and I don't think Jason Kidd disagrees with this, and I think if you like go back and watch the games, like there's still like a really healthy dose of Luka being the guy who brings the ball up the court and initiates the offense. Like neither one of us, and I don't think Jason Kidd, and I don't think anybody who doesn't have a brain worm would disagree. Like Luka's got to do that a heavy percentage of the time, right? Like he's got to bring the ball up the court and initiate the offense. He is an all-time great at that.
Yes.
Maybe one of, in terms of like all around like scoring and playmaking, maybe the best to ever do that. But what you look at what Jason Kidd's doing, and I think for a couple of reasons, make the offense less predictable and preserve Luka. Like there are times where Luka's not bringing the ball up the court and he is off ball and someone else is initiating it. Luka's running onto it through some action. There's a variety of looks that they've gone through to try to get him the ball in that situation. But once he gets it, it's clear that what they're working towards is trying to get him the ball in a situation that resembles highly, like almost mirrors the type of action that he would have after he beat his defender off the dribble.
Yeah,
and getting the
reduce, and like that makes total sense. Reduce wear and tear on Luka. Like get other people some reps with the ball. Like get them more in rhythm. That makes sense. Luka, here's my thing.
So me and you both agree. Like it doesn't matter. Like mix that in. Like that's fine. Figure that out. Mix it in.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. I think that like the one thing so far that I think Jason Kidd, like the Quentin Grimes thing. Let's take that for example because it happened in the OKC game.
Yeah.
The thing I think Jason Kidd has to be more mindful of is that when Luka's off ball and you have a guy who's strong like Lou Dort. What was the one video clip that, particularly on Mavs Twitter, but even outside of Mavs Twitter, you saw circulating a lot about the way Lou Dort played defense on Luka?
I mean, like he had his hands inside of his jersey. It was very funny.
When Luka didn't have the ball. So it's like I figure out where the ball is and what action they're trying to run. I get in between Luka and that and basically play right tackle. And like I'm just going to get my hands up underneath this jersey. And I'm not going to let him get to the ball. I'm going to deny him that action. And I think that there's some where Jason Kidd has to be mindful of the fact that, like, okay, that's a hard action to get into against a defender like that. And I also think there's an element of it where Luka's going to have to say, like, I've got to figure out a way to beat that too. Like, right? Like, so there's going to be.
I got to put an effort. And that's what
Luka's too smart. Like, what you've got to do is you have to have a trap door in that play. Okay, dude, you're going to completely sell out to my front side.
Yeah.
All right, well, I'm going to run into you, push, and then I'm back cutting. And I'm going to the rim, and the pass has to be made.
Or draw the foul. Like, if your guy is holding your shirt, like, inside this, all you got to do, and he's like, all you got to do is punch back as fast as possible, and the ref will see your jersey being pulled super aggressively like this, and you can just flail around, and you'll get a quick foul on that. That's over eager defending. Like, I know that people are like, "Oh, Lou Dort, great defending." It is defending, but that's like bonehead over eager. Like, first off, it's a great way for you to tear one of your fingers if like someone makes a big action, your finger gets caught in the jersey, and then But
also it's highly dependent on the reffing crew that you have. Like there are going to be crews that don't let you get away with that.
Yeah, but a lot of this comes down to what you're saying. Your point about Steph Curry is really important. A lot of the problems with Luka off ball are not inherently the fact that Luka will never be good off ball. It's the fact that Luka, and this goes back to him being a little kid, Luka kind of just chills when he's off ball. That's one of the like because historically one of the reasons for that is historically he has used those possessions as rest periods because he has such high usage when he is running the show that he needs a breather periodically. That like that's one of the reasons. Two, Luka is not a player that Luka is a player that maximizes angles instead of being a Energizer Bunny. Is the
And
best way to
uses his
put that.
size and strength.
Yeah, he uses his size and strength. He is someone like Luka could make you can make great videos showing Luka creating space without actually moving his feet and create like like a defender like hovering over him and you can make fantastic montages of that. Steph Curry is a jitterbug. He's running constantly. That's how he's creating space. And if you're going to be playing Luka off ball, he has to do more of that. So I think
Well, and I think there's a compromise here. Because I'll be the first to say sure, like Luka's going to have to try to put more effort in to create space before to get the ball in the first place. I'm also going to be the first to say he can put all the effort in he wants. Like he just not Steph Curry. Like he not
that was
not
what I was getting to. Putting all that aside, Luka is maximized by being the primary initiator and creator on the ball. You maximize Luka by giving him the ball and say, "Go forth, young man." That is basically the most effective version of Luka. And I think that the Mavs the problem that we've had up to this point with Luka off ball was that it fell too often into Luka's just going to catch and shoot the ball with 5-10 seconds left, and he's just going to be sort of sitting there in a corner or at the elbow for 15 seconds before that. He did not feel like he was having a lot of impact on a lot of possessions when he was off ball because he wasn't, just to be quite frank. And I think that what the ultimate version of this Mavs offense, and the one that it seems to be evolving towards based off of last game, is that instead of just trying to focus on Luka off ball as much as that, it's finding a way to minimize the wear and tear on him and have him still initiate without having to have him bring the ball up the court, for 94 feet up, with the defender there. So find a way to get him with 16 seconds still on the clock, the ball at the top, with the ball at the logo, and to be able to create, just to catch the ball and to be able to create from there. That's where I think it's going forward, because I think that not just Luka gets him in rhythm, but maximizes Clay, definitely maximizes Najee Marshall. Absolutely key for the center platoon. Of Lively.
So I think one of the things you could say too is about the center platoon of Lively and Gafford. One is I think Lively has clearly established himself as the better of the two. But I think both of them, I don't think there's been a drop off. I think that what hasn't happened is you've seen Lively's game expand some, in terms of what he's able to do. And you've seen Gafford sort of beef up, which has enabled him to do a few things he couldn't do last year as well, or maybe not make him where he could do a few things he couldn't do last year, but makes him a little more versatile in terms of matchups.
Means you can put him on the super physical centers like that. Like Gafford could get last year. Gafford, by adding 15 whatever pounds he had, which is pure muscle. He's thicker. He's thicker now. Not often as we talk about thick, we talk about someone who just put on weight. He's put on he's a really solid man. He's strong, and I would now be a lot more comfortable just putting Gafford on Jokic, for example.
Well, that's what I was about. That was actually the example I was going to use. Is I mean, Jokic is always going to get his numbers, but how big he is enabled them to deal with Jokic better than they have been able to in the past. Just because of how strong he is. But the thing I was going to say about those two guys is I think you will see their production go up as you see Luka and Jason Kidd and the Mavericks offense continue to figure out, because I think they are figuring things out. I mean, to your point, one of the things that's crazy too about Luka's usage rate is when you look at that 6-game run I mentioned a minute ago, where Like, so in the last 6 games, he's averaging 31 points, 11 rebounds, and 9 assists, or either 11 assists, 9 rebounds. I didn't actually specify in my note, but it took either way 31, 11, and 9 on 52, 43, 73 splits. Like, if he plays anything like that for the remainder of the season, he's the runaway MVP.
Oh,
especially if they continue to win. His usage rate during those 6 games is lower than his season average usage rate.
Yeah.
It is if you were to take his usage rate during those 6 games and extrapolate it over the course of a season, it would not just be his lowest usage rate since his rookie year. It would be identical to his usage rate his rookie year. It's at 30.4 over those 6 games. So the reason I say I'm coming to Jason Kidd's defense some here is that I think some of the data on, I wouldn't even say data, like just some of Luka's stats to start the season, with him adjusting to a new style of play, coupled with not having a camp and a preseason, I think led to some highly inefficient play from Luka. I think since he's returned from the wrist injury, he's been at MVP level with the exception of the OKC game. I think you see one of the flaws in the, initiating the offense with Luka off ball. But have even with the design being to get Luka on ball and be the primary initiator of the offense. You see one of the flaws in it is that it's easier to deny him that.
Yes. Yes. That is that thing needs to be like bulletin board, like just
we've got to figure that out because that there's no way OKC didn't come away from that game and think this is our strategy for dealing with Luka.
Yeah, if you can deny Luka the ball, even if it's only you can deny Luka the ball for 5 seconds longer than he would like, so that he starts the ball with possession with the ball with only 10 seconds out of 15. That's catastrophic for the Mavs. It's not recoverable, and so they got to figure that out. And there are a bunch of ways, but it could be that against the against the Thunder, Luka's just going to have to be the guy who gets the ball out of bounds for a lot of cases, or they're going to have to get the ball back in the backcourt to him. But this is, I mean,
but that problem is too easy to solve. I hate that. Like, I'm hearkening back to this, but I was literally teaching a 9-year-old the other day at practice. Like, this is what you do when a defender's doing that. Like, it's just not
something like Bill Simmons. I played rec league basketball.
Let
me tell LeBron what I've learned from my rec league times.
I actually wasn't going to mention it just because I was thinking about the Bill Simmons thing, but it really is that though. Like, it's too easy to solve. And so my thing is this.
So should we lend Levi to the Mavs? Would that be the way to solve it?
Have him screen Lou Dort, his soul snatched out of his 10-year-old body. But it's when you look at the usage rate over the last 6 games, coupled with the production of Luka, and particularly the results of that Golden State game, where he also had a relatively middling usage rate. It's not low; it's middling. I think Luka needs to hover in the 29 to 33, 33-ish type usage rate. And the reason I think that is it does enable you to preserve Luka. It does enable you to diversify your offense. I don't think it really has much at all to do, maybe a little bit, with getting other people involved, because I think the end result was Luka was going to get them involved anyway. The issue for me, once you work out the denying the ball to him thing, the issue for me moving forward with the Mavericks versus other teams is, yes, and the data supports this, Klay Thompson is everything you hoped he would be in Dallas when Luka is on the court. And the reason for it is when you focus on details at this level, when you're talking about people like Luka and Kyrie, and how do you differentiate between two guys who were all-time great level players?
Oh, yes.
it's so small that like when you're watching a basketball game, your average person is not even going to notice it. When Kyrie drives and kicks out, that ball takes a little longer to get to Clay. It's a little off to the side. Clay has to reposition his feet. When Luka drives and kicks out, that ball is going 40 miles an hour, and if he doesn't catch it, he's going to a dentist. Like it's that type of thing. And like the other thing too is Luka's I think people could overlook how important the quality of his passes are, because when he drives and he kicks out, a lot of people have to kick to the release valve,
yes,
and then make the hockey assist to the open shooter.
Yeah,
Luka can circumvent that whole thing and it be a behind the back pass or an overhead pass. He throws completely across the court. And the amount of time and how open Clay is in those moments to get those shots. I think that to a lesser degree, well, first of all, to an even greater degree, I think you saw that with Kyrie last year and the renaissance with Kyrie. Like Kyrie playing alongside a player like Luka affords him the opportunity, which is why you see like Kyrie not, like Kyrie's best years have been alongside LeBron and Luka.
Kyrie is best when he is the secondary playmaker, not the primary playmaker, and that like he is a like legitimately
all-time great
secondary playmaker. Primary playmaker, he's like it becomes more dicey. He's
undersized.
He's undersized. His natural inclination is to score first, like that. He just he's not the playmaker that Luke is, and so like that's sort of that's the crux of it. Like it is good to improve Luka off ball. Like you need to improve him off ball, but to make that the centerpiece of your offense means that you have both Luka and Kyrie playing in roles which they are not optimized for. Like it shows, and it's frustrating because if you just flip them, then they are optimized. So if you're viewing the regular season right now as solely sort of like a lab to tinker with and improve players, then it makes sense to do that. I think it's absolutely worth testing that out and running. And I
think you're afforded that opportunity when you're still hovering in the second seed of the Western Conference.
100%. I think that it was. I think that what they didn't. The game against OKC just everything fell apart. Like nothing worked. Like you can sometimes.
Well, and even in our reaction to that game, both you and I said like the first thing that jumped off the page was like OKC seemed like they wanted it, and Dallas didn't seem like they even wanted to be there.
No, and then and there was there were differences in how the teams were coaching. I mean, like if this was a winner take all game, like the season on the line, do you really think that Jason King comes out of halftime and is like, you know what we're doing? Okay, we're going all in on fucking Quentin Grimes. Okay,
no. I agree with you 1,000%. That is a tale. And also, if you go back to conversations, I know none of the audience is afforded to this, but if you go back to conversations that you and I had last year during the postseason, like they lose that first game to the Clippers. I remember where I was when you texted me, because I told you, I was like, hey, I need you to keep me updated on what's going on in that game because my son's got a soccer game today. And you were texting me. And I remember saying, like, dude, this is kind of Jason Kidd's thing, though. Like, he's going to get in there and he's going to feel it out. Like, and and after that, the series seemed like it was in Dallas's control. Same thing happened with OKC. They get to OKC. OKC blows the doors off of Dallas. After that, Dallas has them in control. And then you look at that play in that NBA Cup game the other day, and you're right. Like, Dallas is kind of hanging around in the first half. And I remember saying to you, I felt like Dallas even being in this game seems like a bad sign for OKC. And then what was Jason Kidd's big thing coming out of halftime? Okay, OKC, y'all screwed with the wrong son of a bitch. You know who you get? Quentin Grimes is going to be initiating our offense now. He's just out there. He's trying shit. He is trying shit. He didn't care about the NBA Cup. That's the only conclusion that can be taken away from now Quentin Grimes is on ball.
It very much felt like the moment in the series where it's like, what we have is trick up our sleeve. Quentin Grimes, and the camera pans to Quentin Grimes. Quentin Grimes is like, eating a salad. He's like me, because he came out there and was like, what am I doing?
Yeah, 100%.
And you could tell they backed off that just a little bit because in the most recent game, Grimes played like 18 minutes and had 0 assists. So like they clearly have not decided that Grimes needs to be a permanent fixture as a primary playmaker for them going forward.
My takeaways from this whole thing are this that Luka started slow with the no camp, no preseason, and that he was adjusting to a new style of play. But since returning from his injury, like the usage rate hasn't like gone back through the roof, but he's clearly starting to adjust and get into the rhythm of the season. I think that probably has more to do with him getting into the rhythm of the season and less to do with him adjusting to a new style of play.
Yeah.
But either way, it's happening. I think they do have to figure out ways to involve Luka in these off-ball actions where you have players like Lou Dort who are going to deny that, but I think that's an easy solve. And I think the consequence of what you're seeing with players like Clay on the court with players like Luka is that Luka is going to maximize their abilities. I think the same has been true for Kyrie. I think the same has been true for Clay up until this point. I think you're going to see the same thing from Najee and from Quentin Grimes as well. It's already been true for PJ Washington since he's been in Dallas. Luka turns B players into A players, C players into B players, so on and so forth. He upgrades you. And I think that's going to continue to be true. And I think you'll see Gafford and Lively's production pick up a tick as well. But here's where I think all of that is a problem for opposing teams. But here's where I think Dallas, and this is what I think kids going for. And if you're a Luka stan, let's give a shout out to what's his name, Slow Hoops Luka or whatever, the Twitter page that is just like a Kremlin style propaganda page for Luka Doncic. If you're of that variety, this is what I think Jason Kidd is working towards and why I think you need to be more patient with Jason Kidd. Luka adjusting to the new style of play, which still has him as the primary ball handler, play creator, scorer, all of that for the team. Like he's still getting his shots up. He's going to maximize Clay, PJ, Kyrie. He's going to get Derek Lively and Gafford their opportunities. You're going to see Najee Marshall. And some of it's going to be through playmaking. Some of it's going to be through opposing teams having to adjust and shift to deal with Luka. But what's going to happen is when all of those cylinders are firing, it's going to be so much easier for Luka to score. That's what's going to happen. And that's what you saw in the Golden State game the other night. You saw a 45-point triple-double on highly, highly efficient play. That's where I think Jason Kidd is going. He's not looking to minimize Luka. He's looking to maximize Luka by allowing Luka's skill sets to turn all of his other teammates into problems that the opposing teams have to deal with, which limits the opposing team's ability to scheme against Luka. And once you can't scheme against Luka, you're screwed because you can't stop Luka.
Yeah. No, I think you're spot on with that. I think that is, the ultimate objective is to find a way to reduce the wear and tear on Luka that being the primary playmaker and initiator can do, while also threading the needle and not having him not having him off ball and out of the offensive picture for large chunks of the game. And I think that the way to do that is to find to take away the taxing parts of this, the parts where like a team's pressing Luka 94 feet, or a team is making him run through screens, getting really physical with him and getting him the ball. Find a way to get him the ball at the logo or at top, at top of the key top 3-point line with 15 seconds left, where he can initiate the offense. The offense is set, and he can go to work. Find a way to do that, and we saw that they found a way to do that against the Warriors, and we saw how devastating this could be. And I think that it's kids. Kids a tinker. It's not there's going to be some ebbs and flows over the course of the
100%.
season. There's going to be some games that are going to be really frustrating, be some games that are really good. But I definitely think that we're on track for them to find that sweet spot by at least the time the postseason comes along, if not more accurately, by around after the All-Star break.
But I also think the possibility is, and I agree with you, I think they're going to find that sweet spot. But let's say that they don't. As a result of having played this way, if you can stay as the number 2 seed, as a result of having played this way, when you get into the playoffs and you've got to revert back to heliocentric Luka, you have a much fresher Luka to do it with.
Yeah. No, man, this only becomes an issue if they're just if they can just fuck around and do whatever they want and still end up in the 2 seed. This doesn't really matter. But I think that what we don't want, and this has been this has been a problem for the Mavs in the past, is that the Mavs end up being the 5th seed and then have to play they have to go through a murderer's row of opponents in the postseason. You would love them to go into the postseason and have at least one round which is a relatively easy matchup, and not have to run through OKC in the first or second round somehow. That's the worry, is they end up in the 4th.
Thing is the easy matchup this year could be Denver.
Yes. But if you're able to do this and end up in the 2nd or 3rd seed, which gives you one at least one round of home court advantage, then it's going to be annoying to watch. And I think that it isn't necessarily the best product you can watch, but the full the ultimate harm that this thing causes is going to be relatively limited. But if this happens and suddenly they go 2-8 and then they're in the somehow in the play-in, because that's the problem in the West. You have 1 4-6 stretch in 10 games. Suddenly you're randomly in the play-in. Then this becomes more of an issue.
Yeah, so I think what we'll see from Dallas moving forward is their ceiling's going to continue to rise.
Yeah.
So is their floor. But you're going to continue to see ebbs and flows between their ceiling and their floor, because Jason Kidd's going to continue to tinker to try to find that optimal spot. There is a threshold in the season that when Kidd crosses it, he will quit tinkering and go with what he knows works best for them.
Yes.
I think that, I trust that Jason Kidd is like I said earlier, he has a brilliant basketball mind. He'll find that spot and he will go with it, and that they're going to be, I still think they're the best team in the West. But I think that what you're going to find at the end of that is that this will be a Luka Doncic MVP level season, but not for the reasons that people thought it was. It's not going to be his career high in scoring. It's going to be that he is at the center of the best team in the West. And he's generating the offense for both himself and for his teammates. And it will be because Jason Kidd found a system that not only helps preserve Luka, but gets the most out of the team.
Yes, agree with that. The question, the one unknown that we don't know right now is when that would be. It could be, it could be now. It could be at the All-Star break. It could be 5 games before the playoffs. It could literally be the first round of the playoffs. We've seen that happen before with Kidd. So that will be sort of the intrigue.
Yeah. Well, I think we've successfully decoded Jason Kidd, Luka Doncic, and the Dallas Mavericks and everything that they're trying to do. Looking forward to
I was going to go another hour if you wanted to. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it was a fun conversation. It was a fun conversation. I enjoyed it. I also think I feel pretty good about that. The analysis is sort of maps on to what's actually happening on the court too. But I'm looking forward to tonight's NBA Cup final. I'm sure we'll get back together and discuss that. But I think that this is a good place to end our conversation for today. So look, we've enjoyed all the people who are finding our podcast. Please like, subscribe, share it with your friends and family. We love having y'all here, and we'd love to bring more people into the conversation.
Yeah, thanks y'all again. We mentioned it last time, but we've had sort of a cool little spike in viewership, and we love all the comments, even the ones from people that are angry at us.
Especially the people who are angry at us.
Honestly, it's the best. It's the best part. It's actually really cool to have productive conversations. We found a bunch of Hawks fans saw me crash out over them doing too well. Which again, I will just end by saying, fuck the Hawks. But no, thank you all for watching. It's been great, and we'll catch up with you next week.
All right, y'all have a good one.